Divine the ether. He loved the breeze. John had chosen this place, directed himself to a place of tumultuous calm. He watched the sun gently lofting out of the sky, giving way to night as the storm clouds crowded the horizon. The smell of rain and countryside air filled his nose and teased him with times that could have been. But in part, he was thankful. If there were no war, he wouldn't have been summoned to sample the weather in the first place. War. Remorse filled his heart. War always meant death, and loss were coming, and he knew that the people of this world would be offered, in some part, to that beast of violence. His enjoyment of the storm winds felt heavier now, selfish and trifle. He combed his hands through his beard and lowered his gaze to the lavender at his feet. The flowers swayed in the wind and periodically let loose their petals to the breeze. Ruffling those flowers, a group of lesser aeons sat at John's feet. They each wore headdresses of bone, grasses, and beads. Most of them were men and children, gently catering to the needs of a woman who sat at John's back. Her nude frame was marked with a paint made of ashes and pigments. Her honey-tinted skin lay bare to the winds, juxtaposed by the colors of her crown of skulls, flowers, and vines. Her smirk completely ignores the coming violence and focuses only on the worshippers at her feet, heeding her every need. It will be long, drawn out even, or it should be quick. Over in a moment, like the bolts of this storm, she reflected. Her words were slung out into the air and capped with a hidden smirk. She did love to tease. Who knows how many should be killed? She rattled again. Poor things. John kept his thoughts to the weather and the grasses and the coming battle, but only in the context of his own desire. Shall we prepare a place that we can fight from? John whispered, as his ears caught the drumming of a battle march, and his eyes witnessed the sight of a parade of warriors, demons, angels, and soldiers. I feel it, like a falling weight that I couldn't begin to grasp. John reflected. There is a madness here, a lunacy that I feel enveloping this world. You're always so dramatic, love, laughed the woman. A little madness isn't always a bad thing. She stood and raised her arms, calling her followers to her service. They each took a section of a veil that hung from the back of her crown and marched into a blustering pathway of ether. Maybe we could focus on a lofty little question, love, she teased once more as she disappeared into the portal of ether. Why here? Why now? John's eyes widened. She could have led with that question. In the ether, the woman gazed over a vast darkness with floating embers of ether. She cynically smirked and studied the energies at work, silently signaling to her servants to make a formation. They hastily complied, but seemed as if they feared the prospect of letting her veil touch the ground. The servants formed an arc of bodies, each person a fixed distance from the next, and sitting now, weaving sigils and patterns in the air that formed mirrors of ether sands that reflected the events happening now in the kingdom. Each of their eyes were covered in a visor of the sands, and a bright light burned through. The woman began to dance, weaving powerful, whelming waves of sand that rose and fell with her steps and flauntings. Bells at her hips sang songs that charmed her servants, lulled them through the visions of war that warned them of a bitter future. Large beasts, monsters of John's past prophecies, were displayed in the ether, being crafted and roaring into the air around the woman. She smirked again, petting one of the images along its horned head as if it would respond as a gentle kitten. Its roar purred voraciously in her ears. Outside of the ether, the channeler was being brought to the fields and set to his feet as formations of demons and soldiers ushered him on to face the angelic captain in all of his shining brilliance. John had always admired the angels, having their might encased in forms that brought peace to the humans they attended, and with the blink of an eye, releasing destruction. The skies were full of them now. The channeler looked confused. That was John's most pressing thought. He was nothing but a young man, untraveled through the travails of life. Early in his spring, as John had known for many seasons their chill of winter, the boy needed guidance. John motioned to the mighty angel, respectfully moving him to talk to the channeler. "Introduce yourself," he whispered in a hushed tone. The angel's eyes cut over to Jeremy. He was clearly annoyed at the need to coddle the boy. He would have rathered anything else, but he knew that the channeler needed to be trained and allowed to form his ether correctly. Each of the generals took their turns at introducing themselves. John took his turn, and the young man gazed at him with question. It must have been odd, seeing the frail-bodied senior next to angels, demons, and warriors of legend. John never figured himself worthy. Archangel Michael tightened his grip on his spear and walked to the edge of the ridge. "You're a channeler, a being who can summon aeons to battle, and we've been called to fight, according to your natural ether." The angel was so clearly displeased with the boy that John could not help but smile. This channeler, all of the channelers to come, would have to grow alongside their aeons in this battle, or their service would turn to sacrifice, and their efforts would be lost to history and conquest. He repositioned himself from the rock, pressing against the stone to get to his feet. Soldiers near him, a large man with an animal pelt, helped him to his feet and supported him as he sank into the ether. John thanked him and went silently into his station. By the time he stepped into the ether, that woman, with her attendants and her powerful dance, had turned a dead sea into a thriving ocean, with only a small island of still. This island would act as their workstation, a hub for John to lead a battalion of aeons through the ether to divine potent information. He walked to the head of this island, calling more aeons from different backgrounds and ether types from the battlefield. Numerous angels, demons, and witches answered his call. They sat in pre-planned formations and spawned the same mirrors made of ether sands that showed them some aspect of the worlds around them. They watched anything from different views of the battlefield, key places in the kingdom, and even the landing points of the channelers who would soon come to this world. John was the one who attended them. Through the darkness, he saw 10 flickering lights, falling at different speeds through the ether. He mused the variances in their power, the supplies of ether each of them seemed to have. Another mirror materialized and stole his attention. This mirror showed him the battlefield, and that a few of those lights would make impact in the lavender fields, thrown immediately into the conflict. He thought that to be hazardous to their efforts. His ether branched out and joined with the most powerful, friendly signature he could find. He guessed on who this belonged to, but was very accurate in his assumption. His soft voice found the ear of Archangel Michael. "We must provide a controlled space for our reinforcements. Please allow your angels to clear these 2 spaces immediately," he psychically directed. Michael received the direction and complied immediately after felling a sky full of dragons. He directed guard angels to attack one area while he himself attacked the other. John let out a sigh. His efforts would be successful. His insight mattered. He had a direct hand in the way this worked, and he felt energized. Glancing back into his mirrors, he was startled as they each blinked darkly. He reached a hand out to tap the mirror, eventually placing his entire palm against it. He pulsed ether into the mirror, attempting to bring it back to normal vision. That was when another hand reached out, placing its palm against his on the other side of the mirror. He was further startled and attempted to remove his hands from the mirror, but found himself unable. A woman's face materialized through the darkness, her hair a deep red and matted with a dark fluid, eyes bright green, and her skin dirty and beaten. She smiled at him and raised another hand over her own mouth, silently hushing the senior.